Medieval parents loved their children, but fear shaped that love from the very first moment. In the Middle Ages, raising a child meant living with constant anxiety. Not one fear, but many, layered one on top of another. Fear of death, fear of hunger, fear of disease, fear of violence, fear of sin, and fear of eternal punishment. Childhood was not seen as a long, protected stage of life. It was fragile, uncertain, and often painfully short. Every day a child survived was never taken for granted. The fear began at birth. Childbirth was one of the most dangerous moments in medieval life. There were no hospitals in the modern sense, no sterile rooms, no antibiotics, and no real understanding of infection. Midwives relied on experience, prayer, and tradition, but even the best care could not prevent disaster. Many women died during labor. Many children were stillborn or died within hours. Parents feared that a child would be born weak, deformed, or lifeless. A difficult birth could leave a mother injured or dead, and a family broken forever. Because of this fear, newborns were often baptized immediately, sometimes before the mother had even recovered. Medieval parents believed that if a child died without baptism, its soul could be lost for eternity. The fear surrounding birth was not only physical. It was spiritual, moral, and eternal. If a child survived birth, the danger did not disappear. It only changed shape. Infant mortality was shockingly high. In many medieval communities, nearly half of all children died before reaching the age of 5. Parents feared fevers that came suddenly and burned uncontrollably. They feared coughs that lingered, diarrhea that weakened the body, and infections that spread without warning. There were no vaccines, no painkillers, and no clear explanations. Parents listened to their children breathing at night, afraid that silence meant death. Many families experienced repeated loss, burying one child after another. Because death was so common, some parents tried not to show too much attachment in the earliest years. This was not because they loved their children less, but because grief was almost guaranteed, and emotional distance was sometimes the only protection against unbearable pain. Hunger was another constant source of fear. Food was never secure. Medieval life depended on the harvest, and the harvest depended on weather, soil, and luck. A cold spring, heavy rain, drought, or insects could destroy crops. War could burn fields and steal supplies. When food became scarce, children suffered first. Parents feared watching their children grow thinner, weaker, and slower. They feared swollen stomachs, brittle hair, and dull eyes. In times of famine, parents faced choices no one should have to make. Who eats today and who waits? Which child receives the last piece of bread? Many children died not from disease or violence, but from slow starvation. Feeding a child was not a simple routine. It was a daily struggle against scarcity and fear. Disease was everywhere. Medieval parents feared illnesses they could not name or understand. Measles, smallpox, tuberculosis, dysentery, and countless fevers spread quickly through towns and villages. Hygiene was poor, clean water was rare, and overcrowding was common. But nothing inspired more terror than plague. When plague appeared, fear consumed entire communities. Children often died first because their bodies were weaker. Parents feared the sound of coughing, the sight of blackened skin, and the sudden collapse of a healthy child. There was no cure and no protection. Families prayed, isolated themselves, or fled, often without success. In some cases, parents were forced to abandon sick children to prevent the disease from spreading. These decisions were not made lightly. They were driven by desperation and terror, not by lack of love. The medieval world was physically dangerous in ways modern people rarely experience. Parents feared accidents every single day. Homes were built from wood, straw, and clay, with open fires burning constantly. Children could fall into hearths, knock over candles, or start fires that consumed entire houses in minutes. Wells, rivers, and ponds were everywhere, and drowning was common. Animals posed constant threats. Horses kicked without warning. Pigs were aggressive and dangerous. Dogs carried disease and attacked children. From a very young age, children were expected to work. They handled sharp knives, heavy tools, and farm equipment designed for adults. There were no safety standards, no supervision, and no second chances. One mistake could leave a child crippled or dead. War was a permanent presence in medieval life. Parents feared armies moving through their lands, looting villages, burning homes, and stealing food. Boys could be taken to serve as messengers, squires, or soldiers long before they were ready. Many never returned. Girls faced the threat of abduction, assault, or forced marriage. During war, children died not only from violence, but from hunger, disease, and displacement. Parents feared losing their children in chaos, not knowing whether they were dead or alive. War did not come with warnings. It arrived suddenly and destroyed everything familiar. Strangers were another source of fear. Medieval society had little organized law enforcement. Justice was slow, inconsistent, and often brutal. Children could be kidnapped for labor, ransom, or exploitation. Orphans were especially vulnerable. Poor families sometimes had no choice but to send their children away to work as servants or apprentices. Once a child left home, parents had almost no control and no reliable way to communicate. Abuse and neglect were real dangers. Sending a child away was often necessary for survival, but it filled parents with fear, guilt, and helplessness. Fear did not stop at the physical world. Medieval parents feared for their children's souls. Religion shaped every part of life. Sin was believed to bring not only punishment in this world, but eternal suffering in the next. Parents feared that their children would lie, steal, commit sexual sins, disobey authority, or fall into heresy. Children were taught about hell from an early age. Sermons described fire, demons, torture, and endless pain in vivid detail. Parents believed that failing to discipline a child could condemn that child forever. Strictness was seen as an act of love. Fear became a tool of moral education. Education itself was another concern. Most parents were illiterate and feared that their children would remain ignorant, unable to read scripture or protect themselves in the world. But education was expensive and harsh. Schools were rare, and teachers ruled through fear and physical punishment. Parents worried that without skills their children would starve, but they also feared exposing them to cruelty and danger. Knowledge was both a hope and a risk. Social status mattered deeply. Medieval society was rigid and unforgiving. Parents feared their children falling into poverty or never escaping it. A bad reputation, illegitimacy, disability, or scandal could ruin a child's future. Marriage was not about romance, but survival and alliances. Apprenticeships were difficult and dangerous. One mistake, one accusation, or one illness could condemn a child to lifelong hardship. Above all, medieval parents feared death. Not distant or abstract death, but death that entered their homes again and again. The death of a child after days of fever. The death of a mother in childbirth. The death of a father in war, leaving children alone. Entire families could disappear during plague or famine. Life was fragile, and the future uncertain. Every laugh carried fear. Every cough brought dread. Hope and terror existed side by side. And yet, despite all this fear, medieval parents loved their children deeply. They worked themselves to exhaustion to feed them. They prayed constantly for their safety. They punished them harshly because they believed it was the only way to protect their souls. And when children died, parents mourned them with a pain that never truly faded. Fear shaped medieval childhood, but love endured within it. To be a medieval parent was to live with constant anxiety, not because parents cared less, but because the world was far more dangerous. Every child who reached adulthood was a small miracle, and every parent who raised one carried fear in their heart every single day.